Hello there, Lunar Squadron, and welcome back to the channel. It is safe to say that it has been a pretty chaotic few weeks when it comes to Star Wars gaming, with the recent cancellation of the upcoming Respawn Star Wars FPS, and EA as a whole pretty much pulling out of the franchise outside of the upcoming Jedi 3. However, on the flip side, we're all incredibly excited about next week's release of the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection. Safe to say, it's a pretty confusing time to be a Star Wars gaming fan, and today we want to sit down and talk about the upcoming marquee AAA modern Star Wars title, that being Star Wars Outlaws, and why the stakes were already pretty high for this game. However, the events over the last few weeks have really put the spotlight on this upcoming game, and we're going to talk about just how we feel about the future of Star Wars gaming. But before we do that, if you're new to the channel, we would love to have you as always, and the way to do that, just go down below this video, hit that little subscribe button, the bell notification right on next to it. It will notify you every single time that Andreas and I upload. Now with that out of the way, Andreas, you ready to talk about a very confusing period in the history of Star Wars gaming?
Oh yeah, let's do it, guys. From the moment that Massive Entertainment announced Star Wars Outlaws, we've been very interested and excited for this title for so many different reasons. I mean, first and foremost, this is a brand new AAA title out of a new developer following an era of exclusivity where Electronic Arts controlled the production of Star Wars video games. And so Star Wars Outlaws was this first opportunity for a AAA game to come out of a completely different group of creative individuals. And I think for that and for other reasons, like this being a massive open world game with so much promise and such an impressive demo, this is a game that we were all very much looking forward to. But after last week, I think the narrative around this game might have changed ever so slightly, and that's namely because now it appears that EA is completely divorcing from Star Wars, because we've heard rumors circulating about the licensing fees that are racking up and the true cost of making a Star Wars game. We've also heard other rumors that EA had reportedly canceled this Mandalorian FPS because it didn't feature lightsabers or a Jedi. And, you know, I'm not sure how much of that is true, and frankly, I think it might be complete BS myself. But one thing's for sure, there seems to be this cloud of uncertainty around making Star Wars games going forward. And I think because of all of that uncertainty over the last week or so, I think the spotlight has almost brightened on this Star Wars Outlaws game in a way that I thought beforehand there was a little bit of pressure on Ubisoft as being that first developer outside of EA and that exclusivity window to be making a AAA title. I think the pressure has maybe ratcheted up by that much more of a degree here.
Yeah, I agree. And if you take a look at kind of where we were at before the last few weeks happened, I think the pressure and the stakes for Outlaws was already pretty high, just because they were doing something new with Star Wars, in at least something that they haven't done in recent memory. You know, the first time with a truly open world Star Wars gaming experience. Yes, I know there are a handful of other ones that could be categorized as open world, but it is clear that they were trying to do something new and something that this IP desperately needed with the world they were building. And they were doing it with a character who is a smuggler, who's kind of more of like an everyday person. They weren't relying on a Force user or a Jedi user, at least we're assuming that's not going to be what happens in this game. But I think the pressure and the stakes for this game were already pretty high, just because they were trying something new with this game and people weren't sure what to expect. People weren't sure how they felt about it. However, now, over the last few weeks, with all of this uncertainty coming with the Star Wars gaming going forward, and I've got to say, I'm pretty concerned about it, and I'm not sure what the next steps are going to be, because I'm not sure who's going to be the next big publisher that takes on Star Wars gaming. Is it really going to be Epic now going forward? Because I really thought EA was going to stay heavily involved with the production of Star Wars gaming, especially, you know, with the Jedi franchise being so successful and we had all these Respawn titles to look forward to. I was very excited to see what was going to happen when exclusivity was up and EA was actually going to have to compete within this franchise. And now that they're pretty much completely pulling out and the future of Star Wars gaming feeling a little uncertain, whether it's fair or not, I think the pressure and stakes for Star Wars Outlaws has gone up pretty significantly, because this is going to be really the last AAA title for Star Wars for the next few years. Like, Jedi 3 is coming. It has been confirmed, but it's safe to say that is a handful of years out. And we know that Eclipse is somewhere out there, but God knows how far away that is. I think it's safe to bet that we're years removed from that game coming out. We know there's the Bit Reactor game, but we don't know a whole lot about it. That feels like that's still pretty early in production. Amy Hennig has a Star Wars game coming down the road, but that feels a long ways away. It really is going to be Star Wars Outlaws and then nothing else for at least a few years. So I think the direction of Star Wars gaming going forward is going to hinge a lot on the overall performance and reception to Star Wars Outlaws. And what I mean by that is I feel like we're in a pretty similar position as to where we were with Star Wars as a franchise, at least the film division, a few years ago. If you guys remember, after The Last Jedi came out, and of course that is a very divisive film, a lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it. It was a very weird performance for the movie and just kind of rocked the fan base as a whole to its foundation and kind of split the line in the fan base. And then that following May, they released Solo, which conveniently was another project about a smuggler type character, and it kind of got bodied. And I feel like Lucasfilm panicked after that, and they completely restructured the future of Star Wars on the big screen going forward. They started investing in more of those TV and Disney Plus shows, and that's something we're still feeling today. And I'm a little concerned that based on the performance of Star Wars Outlaws later on this year, if it doesn't perform well, it doesn't sell well, it's not received well, I'm concerned that Lucasfilm will do something similar and completely restructure their current plans going forward for Star Wars gaming. So I think, whether it's fair to this title or not, I think it's got to perform well, and I think it has to be well received. And I'm incredibly confident that it is going to do so, because everything we've seen and heard about this game looks amazing, but I just think that pressure has just ratcheted up ever so slightly after the last few weeks.
Yeah, it has. And I've seen a lot of people on one side of the spectrum completely panicking, saying that this is doomsday for Star Wars gaming, and that just because Electronic Arts has turned their nose at the franchise, that supposedly every gaming company will be turning their nose at the franchise. But I don't think I'm at that point to be worried to that scale about this. I do think it's a matter of EA looked at their portfolio and they saw, on the one hand, games like FIFA are just rolling in cash for them, and they want every single game that they put their label on to be raking in that amount of cash, and with the licensing fees associated with Star Wars, they just don't see it adding up. I very much hope that Ubisoft now is trying out the Star Wars label, and I hope they find it is a successful try for them. I really hope that they do strike gold and that they are able to have a great partnership with Lucasfilm going forward. But Nick, it's a really interesting comparison that you make between Outlaws and Solo, because I do think in that regard they are very similar. They are both properties about a smuggler. I do think in that regard that Solo was almost a riskier play for Lucasfilm than Outlaws, and it's really for one point, and that is the recasting of a very key character in Han Solo. I don't think people were sticking to that recasting. I feel like that raised alarm bells for a lot of people, and it's to the degree where I'm seeing some people protective of the entire smuggler class in the Star Wars universe. I see people criticizing Outlaws just for having a smuggler. People are saying that it's a wannabe Han Solo. So I can imagine how these same people reacted when they were recasting Han Solo outright. But that said, I do think Outlaws is doing something unique in that it is a AAA open world game. And I think that fact alone is going to get a lot of people to overlook any smuggler anxiety, any Han Solo recasting anxiety that people are going to have, or Han imposter anxiety that Star Wars fans may have with this game, because at the end of the day, this is an open world Star Wars game, and I think Star Wars fans just want that opportunity to explore the Star Wars galaxy in a video game. I really do think it's that plain and simple.
Yeah, and of course, there's a ton of caveats to my comparison. I don't want to say we're in the exact same scenario, but it just feels very similar as a consumer and as a fan. And of course, we're not in the room with the executives at Lucasfilm. We have no idea. It is purely speculative. Like, I don't want to put it out there that we know that if Outlaws fails, that is going to completely shake the foundation of Star Wars gaming. But it just kind of feels like we're at a crossroads for Star Wars gaming, because there is a vacuum that has been created, I feel, with EA pulling out pretty much altogether outside of the Jedi franchise. And it's left me concerned. And that's another reason I think the stakes for this game are even higher, because that vacuum exists. If this game is incredibly successful for Ubisoft and they pull off something incredible, they could be the next big publisher that Lucasfilm turns to long term to make Star Wars gaming titles. And I could see that being a pretty divisive decision within the fan base, but that's just something that Star Wars has to get used to. Like, no matter what they do, it's going to be divisive within our fan base, because nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. That's just how it's always been. But if this game is incredibly successful, maybe Ubisoft is who they hand the franchise over to long term. Or, Bethesda's making Indiana Jones later on this year. If that game is incredibly successful, maybe Star Wars goes towards Bethesda and Microsoft and all of those publishers and studios. Like, I just think there is now this vacuum that has been created, and I think based off of the results of Star Wars Outlaws, that will help shape the future foundation of Star Wars gaming. And I just don't know if the pressure can get any higher than that. And it's not very fair to Outlaws, because it's already facing a lot of pressure. But whether you like it or not, you are the next upcoming AAA title for this IP that has been kind of rocked the last few weeks. So you're going to shape the future here.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think with that pressure comes great excitement for me. I think there's nothing better than seeing a project have all of that pressure behind it and then killing it regardless. And just based off of what they've shown so far, because that's all we can really judge them by, is what foot they've put forward. And of course, we're expecting to see more from this studio in just a short few months here. Of course, they reported in their financial report that they would be presenting more on this game, I believe, in May, right, Nick? So from what I've seen and from what I'm hoping we'll see in the short future here, this game will deliver on that pressure.
Absolutely. Based off what we've seen and conversations we've had, we're incredibly confident in what Star Wars Outlaws is going to be, and I think they're going to nail it. And I think it will help push Star Wars gaming in the right direction and the direction that it needs to right now, because I just think we're all reeling as a fan base. Star Wars Battlefront 3 is never going to happen now with EA pulling out at least that version of Battlefront 3, and just all of those great titles that were going to happen are just not going to happen. I think we're just reeling. I think it's very weird, because we're all so excited about Classic Collection next week, but then it's like right back to being sad about where Star Wars gaming is at as a whole. So it's just very weird, but I'm hoping Star Wars Outlaws can come in and rescue us and just make us all feel good to be Star Wars fans in the gaming universe again. So guys, let us know your thoughts down below in the comments. What do you think the future has in store for Star Wars as a whole? Who do you think will be the next big publisher or studio that takes on the franchise? Do you think, if Star Wars Outlaws is a success, that Ubisoft could be the next heir apparent to the Star Wars franchise? Who would you like to see step in and be the next big publisher or studio to develop Star Wars games? And what kind of projects would you like to see? Because I think we're in a very tumultuous period with this IP right now, and anything could happen over the next few years. So just sound off in the comments down below what you feel about Star Wars gaming as a whole. We can't wait to read everything you guys have to say, because I think there's just so many diverse opinions on where Star Wars is at when it comes to gaming, and we just love having these conversations with all of you, so definitely let us know down below. Anyway guys, that is going to do it for us for this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, we will see you all next time.